When I say the term Führerbunker, you will probably be transported in your minds to the final days of the Second World War in Europe, the bomb-ravaged Reich Chancellery quarters, and the dictator sat on a sofa with his new wife, contemplating their imminent demises. There is still so much about Hitler's bunker at the end of the war, which remains sceptical and a mystery, but what is not debatable is the fact that all across Germany and occupied lands, Hitler and the Nazis had huge complexes built which became known as Fuhrer headquarters, bases for the dictator to stay inside of and for him to command the war effort from. Some of these were created with the intention for Hitler to use them, but many were abandoned and not even visited by him, despite the huge amounts of money that was spent on them. But there was another Fuhrer bunker, the Adlerhorst, which translates into English as the Eagle's Nest, but it was not the tea house on top of a mountain. This was a series of bunkers for Hitler as his main military complex, but the dictator actually hated it and said about the Adlerhorst that it was too luxurious. The Fuhrer must show Spartan simplicity. Before the Second World War began, there was no official Fuhrer headquarters. There were the houses that Hitler loved to stay inside of, such as the Berghof, and he also held property inside cities such as Munich, but there were no specially built command posts for him to dictate the German war effort from, and he would use sometimes existing military complexes and even transport to hold meetings. For example, on board his train America, he held many meetings with men such as Mussolini, but along with Hitler's architect Albert Speer, Martin Bormann, the Führer's private secretary, discussed plans to create a number of new headquarters for Hitler to stay in. Huge complexes such as the Wolf's Lair would be made, but one location which was selected to become the main military command headquarters for Hitler was the region around Kranzberg Castle. This was touted as it was relatively central, and in 1939 the Nazi government took possession of Kranzberg Castle and they began to create a military-grade facility around and inside the castle. What was made was a main complex containing 7 different houses or bunkers. The first was Hitler's personal residence, the second was known as the casino, which was a secret situation room and communications centre. House 3 was the residence for commanding generals of the armed forces, men such as Wilhelm Keitel, Alfred Jodl and even Hermann Göring, the head of the Luftwaffe. House 4 was for the second level of staff, men of lower ranks such as operational generals like Heinz Guderian. Inside House 5, Goebbels would take control and establish his Ministry of Propaganda, and House 6 was to be used for political leaders at the top of the inner circle, such as Martin Bormann. Finally, House 7 was the security detail for the complex, and this bunker was camouflaged as a large brick wall and was connected to the castle. Another bunker was also built under the castle, and this would be used as a garage. The whole complex would be known as the Adlerhorst, or the Eagle's Nest. The buildings were constructed within a heavily wooded compound, and each building was designed as an air raid bunker having 3 feet thick concrete walls. On the outside, they were given the appearance of looking like German cottages, half-timbered, and inside they were fitted with traditional German decoration, such as oak flooring and pine wall panelling. They were rather luxurious, and the local people were informed that this was a military facility and not the proposed headquarters for Adolf Hitler. Now Hitler did, whilst the facility was being built, use the castle to plan some campaigns, such as the Battle of France, and he held meetings inside of it. But after the construction of the Adlerhorst finished, it was quickly put into operation. However, as mentioned, Hitler actually disliked the bunker complex greatly, and he believed it was too luxurious and made him stand out too much. He wanted the people to be behind him, and he believed that if he was living a very much opulent lifestyle, then he would be the envy of the German people, and that he would lose some support and respect. He wanted to be a man of the people, and the grandeur of the Adlerhorst, in his mind, damaged this reputation. But after this, Albert Speer, the Führer's architect, who had spent a huge amount of money on the headquarters, was asked to adapt it to meet the needs of the Luftwaffe. The head of the Luftwaffe, Reichsmarshal Hermann Göring, was a man who liked grandeur, so there's no surprise that the flamboyant Göring quickly suggested to Hitler that his forces use the Adlerhorst. The facility was adapted to serve as Göring's headquarters for the planned invasion of Britain, codenamed Operation Sea Lion. But this of course would not take place. Hitler's No. 16 directive, which put into place the planning for the invasion, named the Adlerhorst as the headquarters for the invasion, and there would be different services established nearby to support this. The Naval High Command were also to be based nearby. The complex would then, after the abandonment of the invasion of Britain, become a rehabilitation centre and a place of rest for many battle-hardened soldiers, and it was also somewhere where Goering came to relax and rest as well. But as the war years continued, the Luftwaffe remained, but after the Wolf's Lair bombing of July the 20th, 1944, Hitler needed a new safe space for the upcoming Ardennes offensive. The Adlerhorst had been backed up with further security, and Gerd von Rundstedt, the commander-in-chief of OB West, was based there. Hitler arrived at a nearby railway station on his train on the 11th of December 1944, and he lived nearby until the 16th of January 1945. Also present at the Adlerhorst at this time were Generals Jodl and Keitel, and they stayed in their respective houses mentioned earlier, with Hitler in House 1. Hitler would at this time take long walks with his dog inside the nearby pine forests, and he dreamed that the Ardennes offensive would change the tide of the war. Goering would also live at the castle near Christmas, and it's believed in private that Goering may have suggested to negotiate a peace truce through the Swedes, and that Goering with his links to Sweden could do this. Hitler then, it's believed, went on the offensive, screaming at Goering and threatened to have him shot. He also from the Adlerhorst tracked Operation Nordwind, a further counter-offensive as troops attacked Bastogne. But then on the 6th of January 1945, a blockbuster bomb damaged some local buildings, and with this Hitler then left the Adlerhorst for Berlin 10 days later, and he accepted that the Western Front had been lost and retreated into the heart of his Reich and capital, going to the actual Fuhrer bunker underneath the Reich Chancellery in Berlin. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring then moved into the Adlerhorst and established his command centre there, but the Allies would months later then bomb the complex in a 45-minute firebombing raid conducted by P-51 Mustangs, leading to 10 civilian deaths, and much of the Adlerhorst was destroyed and heavily damaged. Later it's believed that SS men had been instructed to further demolish the buildings by using dynamite to blow the place to Kingdom Come and put it beyond use. The Adlerhorst was captured by American forces at the end of March 1945, and they found a burned and heavily damaged complex. Some buildings escaped demolition, but the British then set up a detention centre in the complex for high-ranking German non-military POWs, with men such as Ferdinand Porsche, the industrial conglomerate, being interrogated there, as well as the heads of IG Farben, the company who made the gas for the gas chambers. Even Albert Speer, the man who designed the complex, was interrogated within the Adlerhorst. In the years after the war, different organisations and groups moved in, including US intelligence units, who used it as a base for its espionage network within East Germany. Today many of the buildings have become luxury apartments, and some of the buildings are today lived in as modern homes. But the Adlerhorst was the other Fuhrer bunker, the complex of bunkers and houses which were heavily fortified, which were planned to become Hitler's main military command base. But the dictator hated it, and believed it was too luxurious for him. He was inside the Adlerhorst before he made his decision to return to Berlin and spend the rest of his days and life inside the capital. But one thing is clear. The Adlerhorst suffered greatly during the bombing raid at the hands of Mustang fighters, meaning that if Hitler would have remained there, then he could have been in great danger within the Adlerhorst from the sky. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.